In this video, we continue our journey from prompts to prompt chains and definitively answer the question, when should you use prompt chains? We'll also dig into why startups are ditching Langchain and other LLM libraries, and I'll share my take on why you should always raw dog your prompts. Avoid libraries, avoid wrappers, at least for now. This is a really important point you don't want to mess up because it can wreck your productivity. So if you're interested in that and you want to see how I use a minimalist prompt chaining method with 0 libraries to build valuable prompt chains, stick around and let's dive right into it. So first, let me show off this minimalist Chainable API that I use to build great prompt chains in the blink of an eye. And then let's talk about the 4 guiding questions for when to use prompt chains. It's really important to know when to pull out the great LLM tools, technologies, and methodologies that you have available to you. Having a guiding rubric and these guiding questions will help you know when to up-level your single prompt or your BAP or your context-filled prompt and turn it into several prompts chained together. We'll then close with talking about some of the problems with LLM libraries. I'm not going to bash on Langchain or Autogen or any of these tools. I just want to talk about abstractions at a high level and what it means when you install a library, use it, and when you trade off your control for the promise of the library. Let's start with the Minimalist Chainable API. So this is a prompt chaining framework that you can use very quickly with 0 libraries using a single function inside of a single class. You'll be able to build out a minimalist sequential prompt chain with context and output back references. But you can see here, you can pass in context. You then select your model. All hail the new king. Sonnet 3.5 is beating GPT-4o on nearly every benchmark. We're getting some great performances out of Sonnet 3.5, which you'll see in just a second here. Callable, which is just the method you'll use to actually call the prompt. And then of course, we have the list of prompts you want to fire. So let's look at a real example. And let's go ahead and open this up. You can see here, we are using the build model method. And this is just putting together a simple class that allows us to run a prompt on arbitrary models. Shout out to Simon W's LLM library. I'll link that in the description. We're setting up Claude 3.5 and we're turning that model here and we're using that. And this is where all the magic happens. So we have a tuple, we have results coming out, and we have context-filled prompts. Now, right away, without me even really explaining this, if you have 2 or 3 years of coding experience under your belt, you can see exactly what's going on here. This is one of the problems with libraries. Very quickly, given all the abstractions, it becomes very difficult to know what's going on. You can read this chainable run call and have a pretty good idea what's happening, right? Let's walk through it together. So I'm passing in some context, right? Just some variables for the prompts to use. I'm selecting the model, specifying the function that we'll use. And this is just a method up here, right? So the prompt is going to pass in the model and the current prompt with all the context filled. And then we have our list of prompts. So inside this chainable prompt call, we generate a blog post title, and then we generate a hook for the blog post. So this is like the description or the subheader. And then based on the blog title and the blog hook, we're going to generate the first paragraph of the blog post. So we're going to go ahead and run this. I'll say py main. So there's something magical happening here that you can see inside the variables. This prompt chain method allows you to pass in references to the context that you've passed in at the top level. We're generating this and expecting some JSON responses. So you can see here, this ends the first prompt, right? So this is prompt number 1. And then we have prompt number 2 here. And then we have prompt number 3 right here. The second prompt is actually referencing the first prompt's title. And this is something that I've needed, that I built into this minimal chainable class and method that makes it really, really easy to refer back to previous results. Prompt chaining is incredible, but the primary benefit of it is that it allows you to build on the previous results, to build on the outputs of previous prompts, just like we discussed in our 5 elements of great prompts video. I'll link that in the description if you want to know what the 5 most important elements of individual prompts are. Prompt number 3, you can see here we have a couple of variables we're setting up inside the prompt. And then once again, we're looking back to execution. So we're looking back 2 prompts. So this will be, prompt 2 and then prompt 1. And then we're going to pull the title, right? So we're pulling that title again. And if we use dot, you can see there, both in prompt 2 and in prompt 3, we're referring back to that first prompt. So we're using -2 to go back 2 prompts to select the title. And then for the blog hook, we're just going back a single prompt, which is going to go back to the result of prompt 2. So let's go ahead and look at the output of this. After we call minimal chainable run, all we're doing here is taking the result and the context filled prompts and just go ahead and dumping them to a file, right? So if we look at this POC context filled prompt, we can see that. So you can see that this first prompt had the topic filled in, right? So generate one blog post about title. That turned into generate one blog post title about AI agents, right? And then in the second prompt chain, we had generate hook for the blog post title, the rise of AI agents. And so we took the result, right? We took the result from that previous run and used that in our second prompt. And then at the bottom here, you can see we now have the title and we have the hook generated. And now Sonnet 3.5 is using both of those as their context to generate the final result. And we can see the results by looking at the POC prompt results. And you can see here that this was the result of the first prompt chain, right? So we got that title in JSON format. We then got the prompt chain result number 2. You can see here we have the hook generated in the second prompt chain. And then lastly, based on the previous prompt information, we're now generating a full-on description. And so this is really, really important, right? It's not to say that you couldn't do this with a single prompt, but there's a couple of key differences that will decide if you want to use a single prompt versus a prompt chain where you divide things up and separate your prompts to gather more information, to expand the prompt, to give your LLM more tokens to reason on, so on and so forth. But this is a simple example of how you can use this minimal chainable piece of code that I've written. If this method looks useful to you, definitely drop the like, drop the sub to show your thanks, and you can grab this prompt chain link in the description below. I'll show you an example of how I'm using this to build out a full agentic workflow near the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. You'll be able to see how I'm really using this prompt chain to drive real value. So this is a simple prompt chaining framework I built in Python. You can check out the code. There's a little bit going on here, but it's not too complex. It's a bunch of string replacing and string templating, a little bit of JSON parsing. The key here is that we were able to build something that solves, 80% of sequential prompt chain use cases with 0 libraries. The only library you really need is whatever model provider or model provider wrapper you need to use to actually call your prompt. So I hope that makes sense. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to when to use prompt chains. So let's ask a couple of questions that can help us set up a rubric around when to use prompt chains. If you've been with the channel for a while, you know that everything I talk about, everything I, quote unquote, preach on the channel, I do myself. I use my decade plus long engineering career and all the principles and knowledge I've built up to really try to stay on the edge of this stuff and to make great decisions to help me drive real business results with real valuable software and real valuable decisions. So these guiding questions I set up and answered a while ago really for myself so that I could really delineate when do I need a prompt and when do I need a prompt chain. So let's dive into it. So these are the 4 questions you should ask if you're thinking about using a prompt chain. If your tasks are too complex for a single prompt, right? So are you asking your LLM to perform 2 or more tasks that are distantly related in one prompt, sometimes even closely related? If the answer is yes, you should use a prompt chain. Why? Because prompt chain will help you break down your complex task into smaller, manageable chunks. If you're trying to, generate a bunch of JSON and you're trying to get a bunch of output from your prompts in a single shot, it's very, very likely that you can break things up, right? And you saw in our example here, we could have easily asked for all of these things at once, but it's much, much better to have your LLM solve one problem at a time. And to be totally clear, these are small toy examples, right? If I was really, really trying to generate a clear, clean, concise blog post about a specific topic, this prompt would be much, much bigger and have a lot more details around how the title should come out, how it should look, what's the structure of it, right? And as your prompts grow in complexity, you don't want to be binding that together with other elements distantly or closely related, right? So I wouldn't want to try to generate both the title and the hook at the same time. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that if you're going to write a prompt chain, you want to delineate your task and you want to break them apart and solve one problem at a time. All right, so that's the first question you should ask when you're thinking about creating a prompt chain. is this task too complex for a single prompt? All right, so question number 2, increase your prompt's performance and reduce errors. Do you want the performance of your prompt to be pushed to the max and reduce errors to the minimum? If yes, you probably want to build a prompt chain. You've seen things like think step by step, you've seen hallucinations, and you've seen other techniques that allow you to expand the output of your LLM to let it essentially think longer. We're seeing a lot of these different techniques emerge. Techniques like Beam, techniques like sample sizes, and techniques like fusion. These are things that we'll likely talk about on the channel, but all these techniques effectively do one thing. They let the LLM have more context, more tokens to process surrounding your problem and your prompt. So this is another great reason to use prompt chains. If you're running prompts ad hoc for your own personal tools or use, probably doesn't matter. If you're running a production level system or you need high performance out of your prompts, even with the best models, a prompt chain will help you get there. All right, so this is a big one. If you need to use the output of previous prompts as inputs, you'll likely use a prompt chain, right? This is essential for when your tasks, subsequent prompts use information from previous prompts, right? And we saw this in our example. I think you can find ample evidence that this is one of the biggest use cases for prompts, right? When you have agents working together, you have sequences of prompts working together to generate outputs that are then the inputs for the subsequent prompt, right? This to me is one of the biggest value propositions of prompt chains. And this is how we build out full-on agentic workflows. We touched on this idea in the 5 elements of great prompts, our Master the Prompt video that we just released. I'll link that in the description. Definitely check that out. That focuses just on the prompt and writing single high quality prompts. If you're thinking about using a prompt chain, you can ask yourself, do I need an adaptive workflow that changes based on the flow of the prompt? If you need flow control, if you need to stop your prompt at some point, if you need to do some reporting, if you need to, insert a step in between the logic and the processing of a prompt, you would need a prompt chain. There's really no way to do this without setting up a prompt chain. If you need to interject and change the flow, change the logic of your agentic workflow, you need it to be adaptive, then you just kind of need a prompt chain, right? So those are the 4 questions you can ask yourself when determining if you need to use a prompt chain. So we can simplify these 4 steps into the following, right? Basically, you find yourself solving 2 or more tasks in a single prompt. If you need maximum error reduction, you have subsequent prompts that rely on the output of previous prompts, okay, right? And lastly but not least, you need to take different actions, steps. These are the 4 cases when you probably are going to want to pull out the prompt chain. If you think I missed a use case of prompt chains, please comment down below. I think I've got this list pretty filled out, but I always appreciate your input. There's a massive kind of gray area between prompts, prompt chains, AI agents, and full agentic workflows. And figuring that out is where all the magic is happening. Okay, so that's 4 guiding questions. Let's quickly talk about some of the problems with LLM libraries. Why are some of these companies, no longer using Langchain? Why have people been complaining and kind of harping on, other types of frameworks as well for quite some time, right? This has been a trend. I've seen this develop. I experienced it firsthand when I started using Autogen way back last year in October. So why is this? What are the problems with these LLM libraries? I think it comes down to really just 3 things. What you run into is unnecessary abstractions and premature abstractions. I think this is a big issue. Tons and tons of layers of how to do certain things, and more importantly, some kind of created subjective opinions about how to do things. As I'll talk about in a second, the truth is we're all still kind of figuring out where generative AI goes in the stack, how to place things, how to work with things, how to manipulate this type of technology. For that reason, a lot of these libraries have just created a bunch of unnecessary things that are now irrelevant or just premature outright. So another reason, it's easy to start and it's hard to finish. Starting using these libraries, and I think this is one of the big use cases for using one of these libraries, Langchain, Autogen, QueryAI, etc., is to get a good idea of how things work. I think that's actually a major pro of these tools, right? They give you a really, really clean, concise kind of breakdown on how to do certain things and how to do it, across several providers, because they always wrap the providers, which is really nice. So I actually think that's a major pro, but it's hard to finish. And what does that mean? It means that things get complex really quickly, right? Things start to boil up, and as soon as you need to dig in and get closer to the metal, so to speak, these libraries become really, really difficult to control. I found this to be true across nearly every tool that wasn't a fully productionized product that just fully took control of everything, right? On the library level, tools like Autogen and Langchain had too many strong opinions about how things should work. And in the worst cases, they were outright creating prompts, creating entire workflows of how things should work that I had to find out the hard way by literally looking at their code. Another one, rough docs and rough debugging. This has improved a lot as the ecosystem grows, but it is still and is a problem. Again, when things go wrong and things start getting more complicated, part of the reason things are hard to finish is because the documentation is just kind of rough. In order to build out libraries like this, including like Llama Index is another one where they try to do so much. In order to kind of dig into their library and dig into their world, you need to read so much. You need to really understand what's going on under the hood. These are the big three problems. So there's this blog post that I had up here by Octomind. And one of the comments really, really stuck out to me. It's here it is. So even if using agents, it's unlikely you'll be doing much beyond simple agent-to-agent communication and a predetermined sequential flow with business logic for handling agent state and their responses. You don't need a framework to implement this. This is so true. There are so many things that picking up one of these libraries is just complete overkill for. And I love this idea, of course, I'm a big fan of this. Stay lean, move fast, don't build it until you need it, use the best tool for the job. And I just completely agree with this sentiment. While the agent space is rapidly evolving and exciting, blah, 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 we recommend keeping things simple for now while agent usage patterns solidify. I think this is super true. I do think, though, you're going to build out these agent usage specific patterns by digging into your domain specific use case, by digging into your problem, and by tackling your specific problem, right? And just like I have with the minimalist Chainable, right? You want to be keeping your abstractions really, really simple, right? Don't try to make something that does it all. As you may have found with using some of these libraries, tools that claim to do it all do nothing well, right? It's just it's kind of a law of nature, right? Try to do everything, you'll accomplish nothing. Try to do one thing well, you will do it extraordinarily well, right? All this simple class does is allow you to sequentially chain prompts and reference the output of the previous prompt, right? Of all previous prompts. So this is simple, it's powerful. Again, link in the description. Definitely use this, tweak it, make it your own. I use this and I'm building upon this. I'm creating simple building blocks like this, and I can highly recommend you do the same. I'm sure you have if you're one of the big hitters watching the channel. I know that you have your own tools and prompts set up, but this is really, really important. So I just want to, kind of nail the point home. I'm not like hating on any of these libraries. Most of this criticism is valid. I think the authors of these libraries are taking things really well. The truth is no one really knows how to build the best LLMs yet. And the models we use are constantly evolving, right? And Sonnet 3.5 is a really, really great example of that. I think these libraries do a great job of showing what's possible and provide a great, starting point. They have a ton of great wrappers for data retrieval and for model provider wrapping. But outside of that, I think I always advocate for staying really, really, really close to the metal, right? I just think that's a really key point. Stay close to the metal. As useful as these libraries can be, they often abstract away the most crucial element. That's the prompt itself. This is something that I've learned several times, and I want to help you avoid needing to learn this lesson. The prompt is all that matters. It really is. The prompt and the simple wrappings around your prompts. Right now, that's all that matters. It's that and the model underneath it. The core value of generative AI, of the revolutionary time and space we are with technology right now, the core value of it is the prompt. So don't give that away to a library or abstraction, at least yet, right? It's just too soon. This is what we need to focus on. This is why I focus on it so much on the channel. Prompt this, prompt that, prompt chain. It's all about building up to that full agentic workflow that's solving problems for you while you sleep. Stay close to the metal. Focus on the prompt. That's what it's all about. So we're running out of time here. Let me just quickly show you a full production level prompt chain that I'm building out right now to drive an entire agentic workflow. We'll look at this more over the course of the channel. I'll have to have multiple videos on this because there's a lot going on here that I want to break down. What we have is this JSON configuration file with the big three, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. And what we have is, a link to their models and some specific header information. I should change this to be HTML selector or something, but basically this is going to select specific HTML elements in the page. And we're going to parse that content out and create a brand new table with price information for each model across these different providers, right? And it's in a JSON file so that it can be completely customizable and configurable. Let me go ahead and just set skip to false. We'll just run Anthropic and Google here, and we'll just kick off this workflow. This workflow has a couple steps. It has the gather step where we do the scraping, the prompt step where we are running the prompts to format the content to, pull the specific pricing and model information. And then it will output the result. As you can see here, we have Anthropic's models getting printed out here from the result of the third prompt chain. And then this entire chain is going to run again for each element in here. And there we go. We got that output. Let's go ahead and just copy this and throw it in a formatter. So if we paste this here, you can see that, with this agentic workflow, it's all set up. It's doing all the work for me. I now have the price breakdown across different websites for these models. This might seem simple, but it's actually really, really important. When this becomes a full agentic workflow, this will actually update the new website that I'm building. It's going to update this blog post page automatically all by itself and keep this information up to date for the big three and for other websites and other model providers as well. And this is all fueled by a prompt chain. I'm not going to go into details of it too much here, but you can imagine, we have multiple steps where we're going to scrape the models. We're going to format the models into some generic format. And then at the end, we use a specific JSON format to kind of, tie everything together. So I am way over for this video. This is going to be a long one. I'll try to cut it and chop it down for you guys so it's shorter. But that's where things are going on the channel. We are, leveling up our abstractions. We're starting to build up these full, more complete workflows that have, real business, real production level value. It's all about staying close to the metal. You want to be using minimal libraries, getting maximum results, moving quickly, and being able to adapt to the new models that are coming out, like Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Again, I don't have anything against these libraries. It's just too soon to give away the most important part of this technology, the prompt. Grab my Minimalist Chainable class to build your dynamic prompt chains. Link in the description. Drop the like, drop the sub, drop a comment if you have any questions. Keep building, and I'll see you in the next one.